right? So it's better to know who actually reserved that car, right? So instead of just saying you successfully owned, or instead of just saying car is already owned by someone else, we want to know exactly who's that someone. So from that car, we want to know who is the owner, and this is basically the bidirectional association, meaning that if I have the car, I want to know as well who is the owner. So I should have a variable here, right? I should have a variable here that is called, for example, remember that we have add is owned, right? We called is owned, right? We called it is owned, yeah. We have added is owned here, okay, which is basically is going to be a flag, a boolean. Okay, so let's just remove this. So I just remove this under a line right there. Right? So this is another private variable. Okay, and we can add as well a owner or owned by. Okay, so this is going to be of type person. Okay, and this is going to be private as well. Okay, this is the attribute text notation. But remember, we do not use the attribute text notation anymore, so we're using the line. So I'm just going to add this as a role name right there. Owned by. Okay, and I should have, from the car, I should know who's the owner. So this is now bidirectional. So I'm just going to edit that line. How do I get to that line? All right, let me just, okay. So we can just make two arrows like that. Actually, it's that arrow, not that weird looking arrow. This is the association arrow, right? So we can either put two arrows or just leave them as none. This actually means bidirectional as well. Okay, so let's see how can we implement this. I'm gonna take all of this in a new cell. All right, so now let's add a variable that is called owned by, and let's set it to none, right? Once someone add the car, after we flip the flag to be true, we would want to say as well that this car is now owned by, and this is the new thing that you're gonna see right now, is owned by the current person. All right, I know that this looks strange, but this means the current object, the current person, like the current object of person class that's operating. For example, if I have this object and this object is trying to, for example, do something like add car and add car 1 into it, right? So the current object that is trying to add that car, if that car is not owned, if the flag of that car is not owned, and in this case it's not owned by anyone yet, right? These are just two persons. So if the flag is not or that car is not owned by anyone, the flag is false, then I'm going to add it to person. And once we add this car object to person, I want to have that instance, a copy of that instance, a copy of that object sent as well back to C1 to have the, you know, the directional navigable from both sides, to be bidirectional, right? So I'm just going to pass the object that adds the car, which is person or P1. I'm going to add it into C1. So the current object, the current instance, the current self of person is going to be assigned into cars owned by, right? Is going to be assigned into cars owned by. So this is not going to be none if we added this car to that person. So one, we have the bidirectional, the unidirectional association, which a person can figure out the car that he has from this car variable, right? So this is from person into car. I can know the car that a person has from this variable. And from car into person, I can, using this owned by variable, I can know who is the person who owns that car, okay? Which makes this a bidirectional association, right? So this needs to be tweaked a little bit. Like that actually does this actually guarantees the bidirectional. Association, like that. But we need to be a little bit more specific. Like, what happens if I did this? Like, what if I copied this line twice? I want to have something more specific, like something that is telling me that P1 or you have already reserved this car before, right? So let's say if the car is not reserved by anyone, I'm going to reserve the car successfully. But else, if the car is owned by someone, I just want to make sure that is that owner, which is owned by, is that owner, is it me? Is it me? If it is me, then I'm just gonna say that the car is already reserved by you. So this car is already reserved by you. Okay? If it is not me, if it is not the current object that's trying to reserve it, if it's owned by someone else, then this else statement is going to execute. I don't have to write else, you know this, right? So the car is already owned or reserved by someone, but instead of that someone, since we can actually figure out who is that person, we can just say is reserved by the car object. Let me just add an if string right there. The car object that is being sent to this method dot owned by. Okay, and note that this is not gonna give you the this has the actual person, the actual owner that is being sent, right? So this is not gonna return object of type person and hexadecimal. This is gonna return what we represent the person with which is in this case the person name. Okay, that's the beauty of using the represent method. So let's try and run this. And remember I told you, okay, let's try and run this. I'm going to refactor this in a minute. That's the last refactoring here, because I told you that it is not a good idea to access the variable directly. We should have a method that actually returns owned by and returns is owned, right? So let's just run this and try to, first of all, let's try to append that car into person, right? So this car is not owned by anyone. Now B1 person 1 has it. So we can say, if we said something like B1 has this car. What if I try to do this twice? Like to Ahmed, I want to append or reserve the same car. It's gonna tell you that car is already reserved by you, right? So it knows that the car has been reserved by me before, right? So what if I try to do something like instead of that, I'm just gonna say that Ali wants to append or save the reserve the same car. So it's gonna tell him the car is reserved, and the car is reserved by Ahmed, who added first, which is B1. So if I checked B2.detect like that, let me just try to print it. It's gonna tell you that Ahmed has this car, but Ali has not been added, so because it has reserved already by Ahmed, and this part is typically relevant to this area here, car object.ownedBy, right? So you're gonna see, what does ownedBy have? ownedBy is gonna have the object of the person who actually has added that car to him, but it is not gonna be presented as an object or a memory, an address of the memory, which is a hexadecimal object or a hexadecimal address, like the standard notation of any object in Python. No, it's gonna be represented as the way we wanted to represent the person object from the get-go, which is the self name. That's why you're seeing the actual self name or the name of the person who actually reserved that car 1, not the address of the object in memory. Okay. All right. Now this is bidirectional one-to-one. One small refactoring here is that instead of accessing these methods directly, which is not really good practice, we should have methods that does that for us, the getters method. So we can have a getter method for the is owned. Let's say check owned, for example, owned, like that. It's a self method that returns self dot is owned. So instead of using is owned, we're gonna say check owned. It's gonna be the same thing, so it returns the is owned thing, right? And it's the same thing here, check owned, like that. And the same thing where we get the actual owned by, right? So we want to change the flag. I'm sorry, this is not correct. This is to set the flag. This is to set the flag is owned, right? So we can use a setter for set is owned. There is another way to use setters and getters, but I don't want to add more knowledge that is going to be making things complex for you. But you can search for it. There is a way to do getters and setters, and a more beautiful technique that I'm doing, which is using decorators, right? But for the time being, this is gonna do the trick for me. So I'm just gonna have the boolean and assign into its own that boolean. Okay, set is owned. So here, let's say that we are calling set is owned and set it into true. And the same thing where we actually check who's the owner and get and set the owner, right? So this is for the check. There's gonna be a get method or a getter for owned by or the owner, and a setter method for the owner to set the actual instance of the person who's trying to reserve that car. Okay, so let's do the same stuff here. Define check owner. So this is gonna return the self.ownBy and define set owner. So this is gonna take self.ownBy and set it into whatever we are going to pass here. Owner, like this. Okay, so okay, here we are going to set owner with that guy with self, and here we are gonna check owner like that. I mean, I call it check owner. Yeah. Check owner. And finally, we're gonna get that person again. So this is gonna be check owner as well. I should just set it that this is get owner. I mean, it's more intuitive like that, right? So I'm just gonna call it get owner like this. Just call this get owner better. Okay, so let's call this now. And let's try to run this. It should give you the same result. There's no difference at all. Okay, what if you try to assign the same one to myself again? It's gonna tell you the car reserved by you. What if we try to reserve it? It should be reserving it successfully, like that, and that's it. All right, what if we wanted to make this bi-directional but one-to-many, meaning that I want to have a person be able to reserve 0 or more cars. So this is one-to-many, right? So now this cars is gonna be changed into actually an array, right? So we can just say here, I'm just gonna write it and remove it again. So this cars should be an array of, or a list of cars like that, list of car objects, right? But since we are using the line notation, then this is gonna be removed. We don't really need it. Okay, so how can we do this? It's really simple. I'm just gonna take this code and try to append it. Now this cars is gonna be, first of all, a plural noun. That's it, right? And this is gonna have a list, or let's just make it a set, right? A set is basically, for those who don't know what a set is, it's the same as a list, but typically if you have a list like this, right, so you can just say append, right? So append, for example, Ahmed, right? So now L has this Ahmed. A set is just like in mathematics or discrete math, A set is typically like that. That's a set, right? Don't confuse it with a dictionary. A dictionary has a key and value, right? But a set only have individual values like value 1 and value 2 and so on. It's just the same as a list, right? But it does not allow redundant values. So if I try to append Ahmed again to that list, nothing is gonna tell me that you can't do that. But if I have something like a set and you start a set like this, actually, you define a set like using the constructor or the class set, and this is now a set right now. So if you want to add something to it, instead of append, you say add. So it adds that specific element. If you try to append the same element again, it's not going to work. It's going to only have one of the same value of the same actual characters. If you change this, then this is a new element for the set and it's going to be added. Okay, so I'm just going to have this as a set, of course, right? And instead of if the car is not owned by anyone, and instead of just assigning into the car variable, which was just a single value in a single variable, now we should say that we are going to add into that car's variable, and typically this is the that's the only change. That's it. Okay, so let's run this and let's try to append. Let's create two cars. I don't know, let's just set any values like that. Okay, and try to append these two cars into person 1, and you're gonna see that person 1, which is Ahmed, has a set like as you see here, this curly braces, has the first car, or that's the second one, the Chevrolet Camaro, and this is the first one, which is the Toyota Corolla. Okay,